If you're enjoying this podcast or any podcasts on the Dragon Wagon Radio Network, be sure to check out the Dragon Wagon shop. You can tout your podcast pride while supporting your favorite indie podcast network. Make sure to check it often for new items and limited time designs. So shop now at dragonwagonshop.com. Get your dragon swag on.
It's the greatest mystery in literary history. A divisive question with highly contested answers. Who was the writer behind the pen name William Shakespeare? Welcome to Don't Quill the Messenger. Here's your host, Stephen Sable.
Welcome back, Quiller Nation, to this magnificent episode of Don't Quill the Messenger. I know I'm biased because the special guest we have here with us for this episode happens to be the reigning champion of holding the most episodes as guest, whether they were regular episodes or bonus features. But even regular episodes, I think she has now, after this episode, claimed the victory title. It is my wonderful and beautiful, smart, intelligent, incredible, super sleuthing wife, Annie Sable.
Hello, Quillers.
Annie is here today because of a chance encounter, a very interesting story, in fact, that actually involves Elizabeth Winkler.
Yes, it does.
You remember when she came to visit and we did some presentations at the Ashland Library, right in the backyard of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, by the way.
I do recall.
And she did a book signing at the most wonderful local bookstore there in Ashland. And I was there to facilitate, just making sure things were going smooth, and perused their Shakespeare section.
Of course.
Well, if you're in a bookstore and you don't go through, here's the truth.
We're drawn to it like moths to a flame.
My first copy of the first folio came from a bookstore in Ashland because I happened to peruse their Shakespeare section and saw that, oh, wow, here it is. They have the Norton facsimile, and it was my first.
You should think that a bookstore in Ashland should have a pretty solid Shakespeare section.
My second copy I received from a bookstore right here in Grants Pass, and it is better than my Norton, and it's beautiful, and I'm so thrilled to have it. I'm going to buy more. I know that bothers you. It's true.
No,
but let's not get into
at this point, not just one section of the bookshelf, just call it a whole bookshelf at this point. Might as well start in that direction.
It's true. It's true, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, I perused the book section, the Shakespeare section, and I saw this book. And it is
The Women of Will by Tina Packer, who is the founding artistic director of Shakespeare and Company, a renowned Shakespearean actor, director, artistic director of a very well-known Shakespeare company in the United States.
I thought, my wife needs this book.
I was thrilled to receive it. I absolutely love picking up Shakespeare titles, and I needed a new good book to read anyway I needed something that's still associated with Shakespeare, but not so connected to the authorship question. Because truth be told, most of the books I'd been reading about Shakespeare recently have been about the authorship question. Kind of needed a little break, so I welcomed it and went, awesome, nice book where it sounds like the author's really just going to be diving into analyses of the women written by Shakespeare. Fantastic.
I've always said that the women written by Shakespeare are some of the best and most compelling characters in the entire canon. And it tells you something about the writer. And it tells you, I think, most inherently about the writer, something about his relationships through his life with women.
Yes, absolutely. As we would say, obviously, knowing who we believe the author the writer to be, that yes, it most definitely, you can connect so many of the females in the canon to females in his life that obviously resonated with him and had a great influence on him.
Do you think, and I know I'm jumping way ahead of the storyline of the episode, but do you think Tina Packer understood that the author's relationship with women in his personal life must have played a role in the way he wrote women for the stage?
Oh, she absolutely understands that. She spends a great deal of time discussing how his relationship to women influenced the arc and flow of the females that he wrote and their development. Essentially the book is broken up into 5 sections with various interludes, as she calls them, throughout. And it is not just a book. It's also been morphed into a performance piece that she does specifically with one of the other male actors that is a part of her company. During the performance piece, they obviously touch on, I think, all of the 37 plays, but perform bits from 25 of them specifically. So it's not just a book. Obviously, it's been morphed into a performance piece as well. But the idea behind the book is how the development of the plays.
It's brilliant to turn your narrative into a performance piece that audiences can witness and absorb through watching performance. That's what the bard understood, obviously.
Absolutely.
And good kudos to her for saying, I'm going to take a page right out of the master's book.
And all I can say to that is that obviously she has quite the breadth of experience as an actor and a director. So I would hope that the performance piece is superior to the book. Because I have some interesting thoughts on how the book played itself out. Regardless, how the book is put together is a 5 sections discussing the development of how this writer grew as a writer of female characters. So it's obviously interlaced with a great deal of analyses on those female characters, which was what I got so excited about in diving into the chance to read. I absolutely love and relish an opportunity to read about the character analysis, because one of the reasons why I love Shakespeare so much is I believe that he is the most preeminent playwright when it comes to the creation of characters. Some of my favorite books to have read when I was a young college student and post-college include Harold Bloom's Invention of the Human. Fantastic book. I haven't picked it up in years, but from my memory, was a very solid analysis of the characters and kind of was prominently solely focused on that. Also, I read Isaac Asimov's Guide to Shakespeare, another fantastic piece that, really awesome analyses of the characters. And that's what I was looking forward to in
You're
this.
absolutely right.
Both
of those writers understand Shakespeare, the writer, like a writer.
Yes.
It always made me disappointed that neither of them were willing to come forward and say, something's wrong with this narrative.
Right. I find it kind of akin to, touching back to how this whole story began, which was the weekend that Elizabeth was here, Elizabeth Winkler doing her book signing in Ashland. And I really love the piece in her book where she discusses her grave disappointment when she went and spoke to Marjorie Garber, because Marjorie Garber spent so much time and energy in analyzing the characters, and according to Elizabeth, did so extremely well. I am remiss to say that I have not read any Marjorie Garber, but I have added it to my list because I would love to pick up something that she's read and dive into it as analysis of Shakespearean characters. But you can sense that disappointment in going, why did this person never question all of the holes in this narrative and the issues in this narrative?
I'll bet whatever Marjorie Garber has written is just as good as Tina Packer.
I hope better. Oh, oops. Did I say that out loud?
P.S. That was a prompt.
Yeah.
Well, you already expressed that you're very disappointed with the book.
Oh, yeah. It was frustrating.
We'll get to that in a moment. But I love the narrative you're going with, especially because, in many of my episodes, I am having a conversation with the subject of the episode, sometimes for the very first time, sometimes, 2 or 3 times in, just to prep for the episode. But here, obviously, I know so much about you, and we obviously talked about the book, which is what led to this episode. But I'm surprised, I have to admit, by how openly honest you're about to become about this book and how you felt about it. And I have to tell you, fellow Quillers, that there was a moment when she was sharing with me some of her comments about the book that I felt guilty for having purchased the book and given it to her.
Oh no, it's great.
I had to express that. I was like, oh honey, that makes me feel, and is there some way we can make this a positive experience? And she said, yes, we can. And that's why we're all here right now, fellow Quillers.
We salvaged the purchase of the book by making it a podcast episode.
I know what's coming, but you're all in for a treat. So go on, honey, wherever you want to pick up from there.
Well, so ultimately, I think what influenced my most grave disappointment in this book, and I will say disappointment, is that I don't believe now that I am steeped thus far in, which I think I just butchered a quote, but into this authorship mystery, as you so love to call it, that I can ever look at books about Shakespeare that are not associated with the authorship question from the same lens any longer. I've been ruined. I can't just sit and read an analysis of the characters. And I think part of the problem, though, too, is that I wanted it just to be about the characters, knowing, obviously, I never associated Tina Packer to be an authorship doubter or to raise any questions about the authorship. Like I said, I kind of welcomed the idea of reading a book that was just solely about Shakespeare's characters again, because it had been a long time since I'd done that, and I used to love to do that. So I think where I got disappointed was a few pages in when it all of a sudden turned into this story about this man from Stratford with all of these ideas about his relationships with women and this idea and these assumptions and these imaginings about how he left his wife and children and ran off with the acting troupe and had an affair with the Dark Lady, which I don't even know if I want to get into who the Dark Lady is just yet, because it's laughable when I found it. Because Tina had a theory. It's just Tina definitely has a theory.
Okay, but she doesn't reveal that till like chapter 29.
No, not that far in.
Does she have? Is that? Did I speculate too long?
Yeah, it's too far. There's not even 29 chapters in the book.
15, chapter 13.
Somewhere about there.
Chapter 13. P.S.
Regardless, and it's actually fairly on in the book that she puts out her theory about who the Dark Lady is. But ultimately, I became bogged down with the amount of, I assume that, I believe that. We must assume that he might have thought this. I mean, just when you throw the word assume and the word think into the same sentence, it just kind of ruins your credibility, I think. I did it, I think. Anyway, that's my analysis of it, is just how many assumes, how many thoughts, how many words there were that were not supported by fact. She claims when she goes into this big historical dialogue about how his running off from leaving Anne Hathaway and his brood of children, as she calls them, in spite of the fact that he obviously loved them very much, but he had to go follow his calling to be an actor. And, she writes this sentence about how she really doesn't know for sure what she's about to say, that her account is very much like Shakespeare would have written it, that she's imbuing it with her own imagination to tell a story. And then she goes into all this historical context about him going and being in the acting troupe and his years in London, his relationship with the Earl of Southampton, also laughable, and just all of this very interesting and extremely questionable and somewhat disheartening account of this man from Stratford that just seems so far-fetched. And
okay,
again,
I want to stop you for a moment because I want to ask you, because there's a few things that you've touched on that I've had questions running in my brain about. And one of them most specifically is you mention that this is a book that is titled The Women of Will. But some of the stuff that you're sharing with us is a lot of details about the man,
indeed,
Will
yes.
Shakespeare,
Yeah.
that actually can't be corroborated. So was she writing a biography of the writer, or was she writing an analysis of the female characters in the canon? That's what I'm really having a difficult time understanding.
Well, as we come to realize, she's doing both, or attempting to do both, because it's a poor biography of the man, and if it is such. And truly, where the book redeems itself even slightly is in the analysis of the characters. And I will give her that I enjoyed reading certain sections, particularly her discussion very early on in the book, because according to her evolution of the female character in Shakespeare's written world, the early plays being a lot of the history. So she talks a lot about the evolution of Margaret through the Henry plays and into Richard. She talks about Elizabeth.
Wait a minute. Margaret is Margaret from the Henry VI series.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, that Margaret.
That Margaret, who then ends up being the old aging mother of Richard III.
Correct.
So that's 4 plays.
4 plays.
That this character is in.
4 plays indeed.
And she says that those are the early plays?
Yeah, so there's...
That's the first female character he decided he was going to fixate on and write about?
Not the first. She definitely loves to point out that Kate...
Juliet.
Oh, no,
Juliet.
Kate.
Oh, Kate's the early. Yeah, Kate's the early.
Because she's such a caricature of all of the male perception of a female that she obviously was one of the first. So she discusses the 3 comedies.
She smashes a musical instrument over the head of another character and suffers zero consequences for that violence.
Yes. Now, you and I know
that... I'm not supposed to point that out, though, right?
Anyway. She points out that there are the 3 comedies at the beginning. So she does Shrew, Comedy of Errors, who she discusses Adriana and Comedy of Errors, Kate in Shrew, and then 2 Gentlemen of Verona. So you've got Julia and I'm blanking. Sylvia? I'm blanking on the other female's name. So those 3 comedies being some of the first, right, in the evolution of Shakespeare. Then moving into the history. So she moves into like Joan of Arc and her in her depiction in the Henry play. And then moves Henry VI.
Joan
of Arc. Isn't Henry VI, not Henry VIII. Oh, somebody correct us here. Ooh. It's one of the Henry VIs.
Send your emails to contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. That's contact at don'tquillthepodcast.com. Contact at don'tquillthepodcast.
Moving on. Anyway, so then she goes into this great discussion about the evolution of Margaret, which is so surprising because she's talking about how this is obviously one of the early females, according to her. But she spends a lot of pages discussing Margaret and Margaret's masculinity, right? Because how Margaret is depicted on the battlefield and being solo and not being accompanied by men in certain situations, and the way she handles herself with men is very masculine qualities, which I agree with. And then
she has a sickly, dying husband that she takes complete control over.
Yes, exactly. She exhibits in typical, kind of male, female, as we personify them, typically, again, more masculine qualities. And then she moves into Elizabeth, also blanking on the last name, starts with a W, but Elizabeth in figured prominently in the Richard III play. Also, great female character. So
Well,
she spends.
he seduces her at the end. Like,
Yes, yeah.
Richard's like, you will be my wife. You're going to be my queen.
Yeah, and quite
It's about
honestly,
politics,
having performed in that play, I find it interesting that she is compelled to believe that's one of the earlier plays by the writer. And again, I am absolutely no scholar, especially in dating the plays. I will leave that to others who are far more knowledgeable than I am in this area. But I have performed in that play. I played Lady Anne, and I got to work with two fantastic females playing Margaret and Elizabeth. And that is
Indeed.
The three different women in that play. They're fantastic, each one in and of its own. I've often called Lady Anne the best one scene character you get. It's awesome. You get one scene at the end, and then one scene at the beginning. You're pretty much done for the rest of the show.
You're right. Without those three women in Richard III doesn't play.
Not at all. And she talks about that. She spends this she does it well. And I found it a good read. Have I read better analyses? Perhaps, but I really enjoyed reading her process her thought on particularly Margaret, because Margaret is one of those characters I am not as familiar with. I will wholeheartedly admit that I am not very familiar with the Henry VI trilogy. I know Margaret mostly from her context in Richard III. But what an incredible character arc through that character is, like you said, 4 plays.
As an actress, you could start that right now. Like, what is that called? 4 plays? It's not a trilogy. It's a... What is it when it's 4?
Tetralogy?
Tetralogy. Yeah.
Yeah?
So you could start that tetralogy.
Again, correct me if I'm wrong.
You could start that now.
Yeah.
And play Margaret in Henry VI 1.
I happen to know a man who produces Shakespeare plays.
Then Henry VI 2, then Henry VI 3, then Richard 3.
I know. Well,
but that's going to take 40 years, though.
Yeah.
Because Margaret
I've
and
got
Richard
time.
III. Yeah, you have plenty of time, baby. It's going to be fine. But don't forget, we are going to be doing Henry VI 2, a scene from that, at the event in Minneapolis.
Oh, good plug. Way to connect to the event.
Yeah, well, it's going to happen.
Good job, marketing man.
Go on. I'm sorry.
Anyway, so... And she also spends later on in the book, she spends some time a good deal of time talking about Cleopatra. Also, I found fascinating to read about. She spends a strange amount of time talking about the play Troilus and Cressida, which is odd to me, but still interesting enough. As well as her analysis of Isabella from Measure for Measure. So those are the ones that really stuck out to me that I really did enjoy reading. So this isn't just me, going, it was awful, meh. There were sections of it that still compelled me to read further.
Did she talk in the book any narratives about when she played those roles? Or conversely, before you answer, just to add both together, if she played the roles or if she directed a production particularly that she wanted to talk about in her narrative? Like how autobiographical was her narrative? That's what I'd like to know.
Very. And more often the latter discussion of, and she admits that she has acted in less of the plays than she has directed. So she is more so a director than she is an actor. And I found it fascinating that she admitted that she will never do both. So she will never direct a play and play a character. She says it occupies 2 separate sides of the brain, and she can't do it, can't compartmentalize that way. Anyway, regardless of the fact, obviously far more experienced in the directing realm, but still has obviously, she was part of the Royal Shakespeare Company she's obviously got some chops as an actress, I would say. However, yeah, she does oftentimes talk about how she staged certain things. I will remember most prominently when she discussed her direction of Antony and Cleopatra. She discusses a scene where she has Antony and Cleopatra's children come out and play during the scene where Cleopatra is about to kill herself. It's those scene lead up to suicide, if I remember correctly. So she will oftentimes discuss how she staged the play. She will also oftentimes discuss how she and the man that she works with, her partner, are staging certain aspects of this play, this performance piece, we'll call it, because it's not really a cohesive play with one through storyline. Because again, this Women of Will book is also a performance piece that they've put together. So she talks a lot about how they depict these pieces on stage as well. So yes, there's a lot of anecdotal information in there.
Did you think that as you were reading through the book, did it ever feel like, okay, enough with the name dropping, can we just get on to the characters? Or did you feel like, wow, this helps me respect and appreciate where your opinion, where your viewpoint is coming from?
More so the former. And definitely a little bit of tiring of the name dropping, yes. In some cases, I felt like the examples were definitely relevant and interesting. But it almost felt like a little too much time was spent on them, and it almost felt like a little bit too much of tooting one's own horn instead of really, again, diving into that analysis of the characters, which is where she shines best. She obviously knows how to analyze a female character. How could you not, having worked in Shakespeare for as long as she has and directed as many shows as she has, and obviously a feminist, coming from that lens of wanting to dive deep into the analysis of the female characters, why not stick to that? That's what I was asking the entire time that I was reading it. Why not stick to that?
I have to agree with you. And I have commonly said that I believe that this author is the greatest, like the first feminist.
Oh, absolutely.
When you look at the Women of Will, my play on the title, if you look at the Women of Will, you see women who are so beyond. You see women that women today want to be like.
Yes.
I hope, I wish, I pray. I introduced my daughters to these characters, and I hope that they want to be like a amalgamation.
Ooh, good word.
Of these strong female characters and learn from the mistakes that so many of them make, which is something that men can do too, from the heroes, the anti-heroes, the villains, from everyone in the canon. There's what you mentioned earlier, the invention of the human, Bloom. Mm-hmm. Bloom wrote magnificent things about the canon.
Yes.
And he didn't go into those places as often.
And that's why
about, the writer. He didn't care about that as much. Asimov doesn't either.
No. And that's why it was truly, like I said, a disappointment to discover pretty early on into the book that this book was going to be such a feeble attempt to connect this man's life to these incredible female characters. And that's why I would say, like I said, I've been ruined by this Shakespeare authorship mystery. I can never look at another Shakespeare book the same because it's so upsetting to see, again, such a...
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. I promise.
To see this, again, such a feeble attempt to connect this man's life to these characters, female or male, but, particularly female, because, he must have loved his wife and his children, but he ran off to go be in an acting troupe and spent years in London and honed his skills. And the fact that he writes great law scenes must give credence to his being a clerk at Guildhall for some time.
She went there?
She sure did.
Why?
I know. Why?
Why in a book about the Women of Will? Why?
Why? I don't know. It baffles me. Hey, I'm getting riled up about it because it's the amount of, again, to tie back to, she talks about, the statement is, I have no idea if anything what I'm going to say is accurate, but anyway, I'm going to paint you this picture, and then proceeds to follow with a series of sentences, all beginning with, I assume that, I imagine that, we must believe that, we should be certain that, he probably did, we're guessing this. One of the best is when she's discussing Twelfth Night. And she goes into, how much William Shakespeare had his two twins, Hamnet and Judith, in his mind, and how much he was influenced by his influence, his love of music, we know not. But we must assume that he probably was heavily influenced by both, or something like that. And it's just
wait a minute. I get it. I admit I have not read the book. I have not read a single line of the book. I did that on purpose because when Annie dove into this book. Yeah, I speak Shakespeare. When she dived into the pages, the leaves of the volume before her, I chose not to peruse its contents. There, is that better?
Much better.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted her to just tell me what she thought, tell you what she thought, and to not be an instigator because I haven't read a lick of it. However, the question I'm asking you based on what you've just been saying to me is, are you sure this isn't sarcasm? Are you sure? Is it
I'm
starting
positive.
to sound like she's saying, we don't know, but we can think, we can imagine, follow me on my dream. And maybe she's poking intellectuals in the eye? Maybe?
I'm sorry, I have to give the direct quote because it's even better. Okay. So hold on just a moment. Twelfth Night. She's discussing, obviously, the Twelfth Night. I'm certain most of your listeners are familiar with Twelfth Night, but the story of Viola and Sebastian, they are twins, right? So, and obviously one of Shakespeare's most musical comedies. Lots of music in the play. So
Indeed.
The quote is, how much Shakespeare was thinking of his twins, Hamnet and Judith, as he wrote it, how much he was collaborating with a musician muse to get the music of the language and the actual music played on stage into alignment with the story of the play, we do not know. But it certainly seems that he must have done both these things.
Yeah, but wait, don't you stop with, we do not know.
We do not know.
Period. Moving on. But no, you have to add speculation on top of.
Certainly seems that he must.
I give her kudos for being and I'm not so certain that this isn't sarcasm. I give her kudos for being so honest about, we don't know. I have no shit what I'm talking about, but I'm going to throw you my imagination. And if you think about, I've had guests in the past, and we've had discussions with others who have talked about, and even Elizabeth Winkler in her book talks about and quotes, I forget who, someone who says, stop it, you super sleuths. Stop looking for the truth. We enjoy the fact that we can make up whatever truth we want. And it sounds to me like that's what Tina Packard decided to do. Hey, I love Shakespeare because I can create whatever narrative I want about him.
And see, so here's the thing that I don't understand, because some of the best points that she makes in the book can still be made without this connection, this sad connection to his life, this sad attempt at a connection. So, she makes these great points about Romeo and Juliet, for instance, right? And one of the best things that she states about the Romeo and Juliet, according to her timeline of when the plays were written and the evolution of the characters, is that the time that Romeo and Juliet was written, it was the first play that Shakespeare had written which showed a female at the same equality level as a man, as a sense that Romeo and Juliet are equals. Never in the play does Shakespeare lessen Juliet and elevate Romeo higher, which I find to be true. Juliet is a fantastic character. Never do you ever see Juliet diminished. Never ever is she put underneath, under Romeo.
She's abused. We see her abused.
She is, but not by Romeo. She's abused by the context of her relationship with her father.
And her mother and the nurse both come to her defense, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, the mother especially also has a scene with her pointing out to her place, right?
Yes.
So
that's an intense moment.
it is. It's a great scene. And the evidence of a woman's place is still strong, which makes Juliet even that much better of a character. Because guess what? Romeo doesn't have to deal with that. Romeo doesn't have to have a scene pointing out his place in the world. Juliet does. And in spite of that,
He's a whiny bitch.
Yeah, but Juliet is still the equal to Romeo, and I believe surpasses as far as language and arc and growth and just everything that makes Juliet so fantastic. And you see that in, again, all of female characters elsewhere too. Cleopatra, Lady Macbeth, just this fantastic level of equality that you don't see. But every point she makes about these characters is just as well made without the connection to Stratford. And why there's a continuous attempt to connect it back to him with all of this speculation is just extremely mind-boggling to me.
There's a lot of money in the endorsements of the people who make their money off of that narrative.
Yeah.
So if you pander to those people, panderous, maybe that's why, maybe subconsciously her fixation on Troilus and Cressida is because she knew deep in her heart she's playing a panderous type character. She's pandering.
No, the fixation on Troilus and Cressida has to do with the context, particularly, not necessarily about Troilus and Cressida themselves. And that's why I think the analysis she does of Troilus and Cressida is somewhat interesting. It's interesting to know the context of that play. But it's not necessary, again, to connect all of that, I believe, to the Stratford man's life, because nothing is proven. It's very much like, I don't know. And I don't know if it's just because in the back of my brain, I'm going, this is all, forgive my French, bullshit. But, and, like I said, not a scholar here. Obviously, I'm heavily biased because of my connection to you and over the past years, learning a lot more about the Shakespeare authorship mystery. But regardless, I can't get through and not just notice. And I underlined the amount of sentences that began, again, with speculation. The amount of sentences, not sentences, the amount of inquisitive sentences that were just ending in questions. Did this happen? Did this happen? We don't know. But we must be certain that it could have happened. We assume it will.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions I think that are important to the discussion that I'd like to ask you. The first of them is, are you saying that listeners, when they're reading books moving forward about this topic, should be asking those questions? They should be listening and looking for those types of speculations.
I think it doesn't hurt. I think will just happen naturally, truthfully. I think if you get as interested in this mystery as most of your listeners, I'm certain, are, or some of them are just starting to embark upon this journey of curiosity about the Shakespeare authorship mystery, it will happen innately. You'll just start to notice it.
Okay,
I wanted to shut it off at times, but I think it happens, and I think you should embrace it.
In all fairness, are authorship doubters guilty of the same thing? Are they guilty of, well, it must have been, it could have been? Are they guilty of the same projecting their chosen answer to the mystery upon the story?
I'm certain yes, probably to a certain degree. The books that I have read, it does not come across as strong to me. It just seems to be backed up by a lot of more fact instead of speculation. And I will equate it to the most recent book that I actually have read on the topic, which is Elizabeth Winkler's book, filled with interviews and filled with her own research. Not a lot of sentences that I remember beginning with the word I assume or I think.
Well, some of the subjects she interviewed responded that way.
Oh, they sure did. They sure did.
Not her as the first person narrator who was taking us through the story, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we've both said about her book that we love is that you just follow her through the story, but she isn't speculating.
No.
She's wondering why they choose to.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that's what we all should be doing. We should all be wondering, why are you choosing to speculate? What is your true motive? What do you have to gain through your speculation?
Right. And I think if you dwindle the biography down, obviously, as everybody listening to this podcast, or at least most of the people listening to this podcast already know, if you dwindle down and take away all of the inquisitive, speculative, sections about the Stratford man, it's such a sparse biography that there's not really much to build off of, and very difficult to actually connect him to the evolution of these fantastic female characters. And for me, that was one of the things that really guided my interest in the Shakespeare authorship mystery. Obviously, again, my connection to you led me in that direction. Would I have discovered it otherwise? Possibly. Maybe not. Who knows? Regardless, I obviously discovered it. But one of the things that really set it apart for me in my own discovery was because I have a strong connection to the female characters that Shakespeare writes. So some of the big points that were brought to my attention of going, hey, wait a minute, this is very questionable and definitely worth questioning, is why this man would never teach his daughters to write. Why he essentially just showed absolutely nothing in the Stratford man shows any essence of this fantastic feminist writer that you see on these pages that women yearn to play. Some of the best actresses of our time have made their careers off of being Shakespeare. You can ask Judi Dench to Helen Mirren, Maggie Smith to quote Shakespeare to you, and they can do it in the drop of a hat. It's just like, no problem. You want a sonnet? Here's a sonnet. I was watching an interview with Judi Dench the other day, and the interviewer was like, give us some Shakespeare, and here she goes into a sonnet. A sonnet! It's like she, right. Not just, let me do some Juliet for you.
Because the sonnets are the key, though, right? Judy knows. She will never admit it, but Judy knows the sonnets are the key.
Regardless, you don't see these Academy Award, Olivier Award, lauded actresses wanting to play these characters for nothing. There is no writer of females greater than him. Not even other females. It's true. I can't name one.
Wow. Okay, so that leads to the next question I had for you. You have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in theater arts from the University of Southern California.
Yes, I do.
When you were studying theater at USC, working on that degree, did you read this book? It existed.
Oh, no, I didn't know about this book.
If you had read this book at that point in your life, would it have been a different experience, do you think?
Yeah,
I know that's hard to think back.
No, it absolutely would have been a different experience.
At that point, you're a 21, 22-year-old actress at a prominent school with a magnificent theater arts program, and you're working on your BFA in acting, hoping to become a successful actress. And would the reception to the book have been different?
It absolutely would have. And here's why. Because I would have just focused on the analysis and skimmed through the speculation about the man's life as what it truly is. It's just fluff. And there's really no solid connection, but my brain would not have... I don't think my brain would have started to question why there was no real solid connection. And that's not... I guess it's slightly an indictment on myself, my brain should have picked up on that, but my brain was so focused on why these characters are these characters that's what I would have fixated on. I would have been able to skim over all of those questions that are so glaring to me now more more easily. I mean, quite honestly, I'm scared to pick up texts that I used to love to read because I'm like, oh gosh, what if they're full of them and I just missed it?
Wait a minute. So here's where I'm going next. If there were a similar book, not written by Miss Packer, but written by an actress who has played many of those roles, or even a director or a producer who has directed or produced or studied or delivered those roles to actors. I mean, because you know what I believe, and I say this more often than I probably should. If you've spent hundreds of hours with these plays in rehearsal, you know them.
Yes, you're a master.
You know them in a different way.
You absolutely
You don't know them better than others who have studied them for hours and hours and hours as a piece of literature, but you know them in a different way.
Absolutely.
And I would like to say that I believe that the writer wanted people to know them the way that we who are in the theater know them.
They were written to be performed.
And it is why the women you just mentioned want to play and have played those roles through their careers. And you could find some magnificent performances by all three of the women she just mentioned.
And
in
more.
So many magnificent Shakespeare female roles. It's incredible.
It certainly is.
Oh, Helen.
Yes.
Maggie,
Oh, Helen.
Judy. My goodness. I mean, wow. What I'm saying is, what if there was a book written by someone who was skilled enough, adept enough to give the analysis of these characters from the perspective of Edward de Vere as the writer and why he was writing this female? What woman in his life influenced the creation of that role? Why did he emphasize so much on Margaret through the tetralogy that is the Henry VI's and Richard III? What's happening there? Why does Cleopatra have the longest and best dying monologue? Juliet says 5 lines and she's dead.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's got lots of other monologues though leading up to it.
Not the same.
Not the same.
Romeo gets this awesome monologue.
Yeah, he does. Cleopatra's got the, I mean,
Cleopatra
you
has
just hear
awesome,
about Lady Macbeth's death.
Yeah, she doesn't get to say shit.
No.
She's dead.
She's dead.
Somebody comes in and says, oh, she's dead.
Yeah.
Same with Portia. Like, come on. So these are questions that I think if you had a book that explained a lot of that and explained why Edward de Vere, the writer, wanted to depict these women this way and who they're based on, I think young actresses going through BFA programs in major universities today would dive on that.
Yes, if it was the right, I think if it was the right person putting it out, but also if it stayed true to the analysis of the characters. And I think one of the things that you have to do in this situation is not get so, you truly, it's a fine line because yes, do you want to connect the man's life to the work? Obviously she really wants to. And I applaud her attempt because obviously she's without a doubt a staunch Stratfordian. And she's trying very hard to connect the man's work to, or the man's life to the work. As we've stated, we've talked about this before, where no other playwright do you get away with going, oh, the works are the works. They're awesome. We don't care who wrote them. We don't need to know anything about the man who wrote them. Whereas we spend so much time in theater analysis. And yes, as somebody who has studied in the college setting, in the more academic setting, I know he holds, his directorial skills are fantastic. And obviously he's directed far more plays than I have. I have been in a lot of them, but I've also looked at and studied Shakespeare in the very academic realm. And where you draw that line is, you spend time in theater analysis diving into who the playwright is and their connection to their work. We talk about Tennessee Williams, right? I really like Tennessee Williams as a very different playwright. His female characters tend to be pretty different than the Shakespearean females, but I still really love some of his female characters for various different reasons. But knowing what I know about that man and his biography, you can see that man in a lot of his female characters. And
that's a magnificent point, because I would argue that those people who want to look at the sonnets and they want to look at the dedications to Southampton and want to create a homosexual love affair there really need to just go study Williams, because Tennessee Williams, it's so evident and it's so prevalent there. And it is true that he is the storyteller character through his female characters, whether it's Alma in Summer and Smoke, which most people don't even know about.
It's a very obscure one, but it's one of my favorites.
Right?
Otherwise, I haven't read it in so many years.
In Streetcar, or it's you just keep going through the list. But when you look at Shakespeare's female characters, you don't see him living his life through them. You see him empowering women.
Yes, that's very true. Which is, if that is the story, then that is the story. And yes, you can see how, and that's what Tina Packer is attempting to do, is her statement of the various women that he encountered with and his connections to different women influenced him to have this evolution in his depiction of the female character. I will take this time to now get into what she believes is the Dark Lady of the Sonnets, which happens to be Amelia Bassano, because she likes
Elizabeth
to
Winkler, are you listening?
I hope so. She writes this great little biography. I mean, with far more fact about Amelia Bassano than she's ever written about the man from Stratford in like 3 pages. She writes more fact about Amelia Bassano than I feel like she writes about Stratford man throughout the rest of the book. About Amelia's life, and about how, even though correct me if I'm wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I am not a scholar. I don't believe that there is any historical context to the idea that Amelia Bassano and a man from Stratford ever met and ever connected, ever had any type of affair. And she doesn't state very specifically, though she very much insinuates that there was a very sexual affair between the two of them, which caused her to become the Dark Lady of the Sonnets. And she was a lot of Oxfordians who
would totally agree with that if it's Oxford and Amelia.
Instead of the
I
man
disagree,
from
but there are a lot of people who believe that that's probably what happened.
I feel like that's probably far less far-fetched, forgive my verbiage there, than the idea that, she just happened to encounter the man from Stratford and very much influence his evolution of female characters and becoming the Dark Lady of the Sonnets. And, it's interesting you mentioned Southampton. She gives this interesting speculation about how the Dowager Countess was really wanting Southampton to marry. And so this up-and-coming writer that had just kind of entered the London scene, so she commissions him to write these poems to get Southampton to marry, and it doesn't work, but through it, they forge this awesome friendship. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that there's any real historical context to that at all. Anybody knows anything about the Stratford man and Southampton becoming buddies, please let me know.
I'm going to defend Tina Packer.
Okay, defend Tina Packer.
I'm going to say once again that she was baiting you.
No.
She was baiting all of us. She knew at the time she wrote this book, the truth, but she took this to such an extreme that she totally is being so sarcastic and so facetious as to make a giant point that it's impossible that the Stratford man could possibly ever know Amelia Bassano, but that she actually believes Amelia Bassano is involved in this mystery some way. And I'm going to tell you, there are hundreds and maybe thousands of authorship skeptics who believe Amelia Bassano is involved in some way.
In some way.
That she's involved in some way.
Yeah, influence, yeah.
So, Tina Packer is a convert. She believes that, she knows that the truth of this mystery is this. The circles involved are tight.
Yeah.
They're incestuous,
mm-hmm.
and they're all names.
Oh, she mentions a lot of prominent players in that, she mentions...
The one name that doesn't belong is William Shakespeare of Stratford. It's the only name who doesn't belong.
She never mentions Edward de Vere, but she most definitely mentions... She goes a lot into Sir Philip Sidney and how his influence was so prominent. Apparently, according to Tina Packer, Shakespeare of Stratford... really, really loved and respected Sir Philip Sidney and kind of wanted to follow in his footsteps as a poet. So anyway, there are other mentions of Lord Burleigh and Francis Walsingham and the Queen herself in various, and again, I'd like to believe that obviously the statements she's making about these people have fact attached to them. I don't know enough again about myself to know whether or not it's all factual. She cites dates and chronology. The places where she states the most fact are all about other people besides Shakespeare of Stratford. That's when all the speculation comes, is trying to connect with all of these people that she's pointed out these facts about, how he connects, how he fits into that puzzle.
What's coming to mind right now, and I hope that you find this as amusing as I do, our children. Annie and I have 3 children. We love them. They're the lights of our lives. They are Stella, Sienna, and Skylar. Stella will be 10 on Christmas Eve. Skylar will be 5 in January. Sienna will turn 7 in November, right after Thanksgiving. They are magnificent, and we love them so much. However, what you're trying to say to me is a child's fairy tale.
Yeah.
Because this is starting to sound like an episode of one of the books that they love to read, one of their favorite series that they all have gone through, and Skylar's starting now, is the Magic Treehouse. This is a Magic Treehouse episode.
Insert yourself into the Shakespeare story.
No. So Will Shakespeare of Stratford climbed up the Magic
Treehouse. Yeah.
And come on.
No, you're right. And that's why it was, mildly infuriating, truly, to read this play. And it got me sucked in because it was almost like I was torturing myself reading some sections of it, because I was like, why am I still reading this? But it was curiosity of how far is this speculation going to go? And again, just constant question of my mind of going, why is this necessary? Stick to this. Stick to what you're talking about with Margaret. The moments that she talks about Constance, she does this, again, five sections of the story, and she breaks this up into these various interludes where she likes to discuss certain things. And what she does this interlude about lamentation and women's shows of lamentation. Awesome. Great. Talk about Constance ripping her hair out in King John. And this is one place. This is one place moment that you can agree with Tina Packer. She loves King John and does not understand why it is not produced more.
Neither do I. So see,
there we go. You guys have a connection. She talks about, Constance. She talks about Anne lamenting over her, it's her father-in-law. And just, these various shows of
wait a minute.
grief.
Constance is John and Richard III.
Yeah, Constance is John. I skipped. Yeah. I went over to Anne in Richard III, lamenting over her father-in-law. Yeah, I know.
Right before Richard seduces her.
Sorry, jumped fast.
Over the grave of her husband.
Went from John to Richard.
Sure, okay, just keeping up. I'm sorry.
So anyway, discussing, and truthfully, it becomes a little convoluted because she has this progression that she's trying to talk about. So she talks about these early plays. So in my brain, going kind of okay, we're going on a journey. She's going to talk about what she feels are the early plays and how they're different from these plays, and how then it moves to the progression of these plays, and particularly, obviously, the females in all of these plays. But then she divides it up by these little interludes that she does where she spends some more time analyzing specific things and incorporates them together. So you kind of lose sight of the chronology of it. You're like, wait a minute, I lost track of, was Much Ado before Twelfth Night or was it after Twelfth Night? Like, and again, I'm not a chronology person. I am not a scholar in that area. She's kind of putting her own idea into what the evolution of the plays was, based on this idea of the evolution of the female characters. But it gets very foggy because of the bouncing back and forth. And
I defer to Kevin Gilvari. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I mean, when it comes to dating the plays.
Okay, got it.
His volume.
That's his.
His volume is
expertise.
I mean, yeah, there is an episode, by the way, folks, you can go back and find it.
And truthfully, I have a tremendous amount of respect for women in this realm. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tina Packer, I will say, because she has directed the amount of Shakespeare plays that she has. She's obviously been successful in her own right to be the founding artistic director of a company that still continues and has been and going on for a very, very long period of time.
Absolutely.
Okay? I hope that she is far, far superior a director, actor than she is a writer. Because, again, deeply disappointing in the connection, the attempts of connection of this Stratford man's life to these plays. It was disheartening.
Okay, but wait a minute. If you can condemn her content and lack of substance in places, and you have done a great job of praising her where she has nailed it and succeeded in what she is best at. But when you call her a poor writer, what does that mean?
Ooh, okay.
You don't like her narrative?
Well, I didn't specifically say she
can't
was
form a sentence.
Oh no, she can definitely form a sentence. And like I said, when she's focusing on analyzing the characters, it's good. You mentioned before the anecdotes. It gets pretty anecdotal at times, and there are really big punches of the feminism in it, which I will admit, I am a wholehearted feminist. In not the very typical way. I think one of the ways that I am the most feminist is because I love Shakespeare's women so much.
I'd say it's because you are the breadwinner in our family, and I am the gig worker who takes care of our children while you're at work. And,
I am but I'm also
I am the household cook and shopping guy, and you are the bring home the paycheck person. So I'd say that's very feminist.
That's true, right? I am sometimes I'm not a very conventional woman in some areas, but more of like a non-traditional. But I believe one of the best ways that you can look at the feminism of a writer, particularly a playwright like Shakespeare, is to let it speak for itself. And you don't have to hit the reader home with the connections to necessarily modern viewpoints and things like that. And that's just my thought process. It felt too much like this is what this feminist point is, and this is the point that I'm going to make.
Okay, take the word feminism out.
Okay.
Right. And again, I made the point earlier, and I think it's important to note that when the book was written, it's like 20 years old, this book. 15 years?
No, I think it's it's about 8 years old. Came out. It was published in 2015.
Okay. 8 years. Okay. 8 years old. Wow. I was way off. 8 years old. It sounds older.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's true. So 8 years old, when you write this book, you write it, and I've made this point, and I think that who is your market? And I think the publishers know the market.
Sure.
Elizabeth and I talked about this in our episode that I did with her. Who's the market? Why'd they choose the title? Why'd they choose the cover? And I've had this conversation with other writers. So why'd they choose Ellen Terry as Macbeth on the cover of the book?
Right.
I don't know. That doesn't actually make any sense to me, considering who the market is, because the 20-something-year-old college theater students who want to play these roles, these roles that the greats have always wanted to play, and now want some insight into how to play them. What about Ellen Terry would draw them to the book? the contents of the book might draw them to the book and might have done well for them. But now you're long enough out of college that you're not one of those student.
Okay,
you're not a student actress. Well, the point being is, I feel like the book was written for student actresses.
Yeah, I don't think that's a far-fetched idea. I think that it would probably be one of the... I don't think this is one that Shakespeare scholars are readily going to pick up. I think it was definitely geared more toward performance, people who are actors, people who seek Shakespeare texts for analysis for performance. And yes, for obviously it being a focus on the female characters is geared more toward the feminine reader. And probably, like you said, a younger female reader who is interested in playing these roles and using this book as analysis for it.
But could a man benefit from reading about and learning about the female roles in Shakespeare, especially if he's a Shakespearean actor?
Absolutely.
So do you limit your audience potential by focusing so directly in such a laser way at something? And is that maybe what has been the shelf life of the book?
Perhaps. I think truly, and I will say, I did say that she kind of takes these moments to really hound in the feminist point. It doesn't happen extremely often, and it wasn't so often that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm being hit over the head. When it did happen, I felt like I was being hit, but the hitting didn't last for very long. But it almost felt like it was so forced. As in, I'm trying so hard to make a connection to the modern world by making a statement about rape or making a statement about just general abuse or subjugation of women, and talking about it in a very modern context. And it felt like this attempt to take a moment to get on a soapbox and make a statement and then jump back into what I'm going to be analyzing. I don't think that's necessary, and that's just my opinion. I mean, if there are people who that really speaks to, absolutely, to each his own, and maybe there are readers of this book who really enjoy those brief connections to modern ideas and modern contexts. But again, my belief is that the plays speak for themselves and that I don't need a strong message about rape to tell me that what Shakespeare wrote about rape in certain plays was profound. And what, she talks about a lot in Measure for Measure, obviously, because that's a big idea, is that, the Duke, Angelo, right? That's the villain. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Sorry, my brain
Angelo
on some
says,
of these.
Oh, you want to save your brother?
Save your brother?
Have sex
Sleep with me. Yeah. And she is adamantly, Isabella is adamantly against it. And there's a conversation, that scene between her and her brother, where he's like, are you kidding me? You'd rather let me die than, sleep with the guy? What? Go sleep with the guy. Really? What's worse? Me? And it talks, I don't need a real strong statement about rape then to tell me that this is a very, very profound statement about that subject coming from a man in the, hundreds of years ago. It's just incredible when you think about it. And any intelligent brain can think that on their own.
Here's a speculation.
Yeah.
When Anne Vavasour is in the tower with her brand new baby, fathered by Edward de Vere.
Mm-hmm.
Edward's also in the tower. He gets called to the Queen's chamber, and she says, you want to save your lover?
Oh, man, really?
Come to bed with me. Show me that I'm the only woman for you. And I'll let her go, and the baby too. What if that actually happened? And that's the impetus for Measure for Measure. It's just as solid
I was just about
as
to
what
say.
Tina Packer has written in her book.
We don't know if what Stephen says has any accuracy to it, but we might assume that
I'd
it
like to
could.
imagine, I'd like to believe, I think it's quite possible that.
But you're right.
How is it
You're right.
different?
It's not any different. And that's what makes this book, it was, like I said, mildly infuriating to read, because in my brain it couldn't go. Like, there is no fact connected to this. This is all speculation. And she's trying so hard to connect a life of speculation to these fantastic female characters. If you must connect a life at all, do the research to connect the life. Or, I mean, I don't know of a book, like you said, it would be a fantastic book if written the right way that can truly connect all of the females that Edward de Vere encountered and his own evolution and his own life, and connect it to the female characters. But without a doubt, there's going to be a fair amount of speculation in that book too.
Sure,
because
but
there are certain things that we just do not know.
Are you a theatrical analyst or are you a historical biographer? You cannot be both once you choose this topic as a Stratfordian.
No, you cannot.
You have a better chance.
She tries.
You have a better chance of being both if you choose this topic as an Oxfordian.
I agree.
But still, you must, as you say, point to, you have no choice but to say, well, here's why we believe this.
Yes.
The difference is we can say, here's why we believe this.
Right.
They don't say why. They just say, we can and we shall and we will. And we're going to make him the unicorn of unicorns because that's what suits my narrative and it will sell books. And so I'm asking you, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, would you have bought, I'm surprised you didn't have this book when I bought it for you, but would you have purchased this book if in your schooling, some theater professor said this is required reading?
Oh, of course.
So do you think it's been required reading ever?
No. Well, and one of the reasons why, and I'll just touch back, I just don't think she's a solid enough writer for it to become required reading.
How do we get authorship mystery texts into the required reading lists of universities?
Okay, well, that is a question that would need to be answered by a far superior mind than mine on this question.
What do you think would work? What would be your first move?
I think we're taking steps in the right direction. The youth need to be engaged in this question, and I think one of the ways that you get them engaged is by having very thoughtful, provocative pieces written about it. I think I will again sing the praises of Elizabeth Winkler. We've been talking about her a lot lately because she is actually writing and she's young. She's younger than I am. And she's putting out very thought provocative, and backed up by so much research, and she's asking so many intelligent questions. And I think that's one of the ways that we have to start, is we have to get the youth engaged. And you don't really get the youth engaged in that thought process unless one, they have to know about it. It has to be marketed properly. But two, it has to be fresh and new and exciting. And how do you make a man who lived so many years ago, or a mystery that's been how long in the makings, fresh and exciting again? Is that it has to be sung by new voices, young voices. You know, you have to try to get the youth involved in it. But also there has to be, there just has to be a lack of fear in any professors who might want to ask the questions about why we can only make these very, very feeble attempts to connect the man from Stratford to these works. It really has to take that person to go, I'm not going to just shun this aside any longer and just be a character analyst. I want to start asking those provocative questions.
Okay, well, let's shift gears on that for a moment, because I think you're capable of that. And I would start by saying, and I think it's important that the listeners know, and maybe you can tie this to your analysis of Tina Packer's book. How many of the characters did she talk about you talked about some of the characters that she talked about that you haven't played,
Mhm.
but you haven't said a lot about the characters she talked about that you have played.
Mhm.
And did you agree? Did you disagree as an actress, as someone who has studied those roles and performed them on the stage, with her analysis of some of those roles? Can you give us a couple?
Oh, when she sticks to the analysis of the roles, I can agree with most of what she says. So like I said, when she sticks to just that, it's good. It's fine. And it's worth reading. But the I almost wanted it. I wanted it deeper. I wanted it to go deeper. And I think, right, you could have taken away all of that, attempt at becoming the history biography and spent more time on the characters that needed the time. Like I said, I find it interesting that, she'd would spend 10 to 11 pages on Cleopatra and Isabella from Measure for Measure, which I agree with. Great characters to really focus on. But, Beatrice was 2 pages. Rosalind, the queen, the greatest of the cross-dressers, I think she calls her. So truth. Rosalind is a fantastic character, but she spent a whole lot of time on Rosalind. She doesn't say anything that I haven't heard before. It's a surface level analysis from my perspective. I have played these characters. I've dove deep into these characters. I've played Rosalind, Ophelia, Beatrice, Lady Macbeth, Lady Anne. And aside from that, done really in-depth scenes from Cleopatra, Juliet, Julia from Two Gents, Portia from Merchant of Venice. Lots of these characters, Olivia and Viola from Twelfth Night. So there's a lot of, and this is one of the reasons why I love spending time, not just as an actress, it's not the performance, but it's the analysis that goes into the performance as well, which is why I sought texts. I didn't have to read Harold Bloom when I was in college. I wanted to. Didn't need to read Isaac Asimov. I wanted to, because to me, I loved reading the analysis. I loved digging deeper. I loved getting the idea of who these characters were, what made them tick, what made them move. So my perception of hers is that it's pretty surface level and that most people could pick up pretty easily the analysis that she wrote on most of the characters. She does dig deeper on some of them, and where she does, I like it. Like I said, Margaret, Cleopatra, Isabella, those are the ones that stuck out for me the most. I was sad that she didn't spend as much time on some of the ones that I've loved playing the most, Rosalind, Beatrice being the 2 most prevalent.
So if you were going to write a book about the women of Shakespeare, would you do an entire chapter on each major female character?
Likely, yeah. Each one requires a chapter. Some not as long of chapters, but still, you can do a chapter on each one, no problem.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
100%. She hits home on some points that I absolutely 100% agree with in her analysis, but I gained nothing new from reading her book as far as the analysis of the characters go. And again, if I was picking this up as my very first deep dive into analysis of Shakespeare females, I would have learned something. So my perception is biased, but I've gotten more from other texts. I've gotten more just from doing my own scansion of the text and reading finding out what the meanings of the words are and putting together my own layers, like making my own analysis, for lack of a better term, creating my own imaginative story like William Shakespeare would have.
Well, I suppose that's what an actor or an actress does.
Yes, you do. You imbue your own perception of it.
When you're bringing that character to life, it's your interpretation of the character.
It is.
It's a collaboration with the director and the other actors.
And the playwright.
And he's not
dead as
alive.
he may be.
He's not there to go, no, this is what I meant. But I do believe that it's important to know, to at least understand what you think he meant. And I think by understanding the life of the true author,
I think
it's going to help us all. And that's to say that, yes, I lean towards Edward de Vere, but I'm like, the jury's out. We that's the point of this whole mystery, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Is the jury's out and we need something to convince the jury.
Mm-hmm.
So let's keep asking questions. Let's keep digging. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you, and I know the answer, but the listeners maybe don't know.
Yeah.
You mentioned so many of the roles you have played in the canon, but I'd like you to share some of the roles you have yet to play that are on your bucket list of Shakespeare women. You said Margaret. That's important.
Yeah, Margaret, obviously. Female bucket list. Margaret. I'd love to play Elizabeth in Richard as well. Volumnia in Coriolanus. Yeah, she does talk she points out some good things about Volumnia. It's a very obscure play too.
It is.
Tamara in Titus.
Ooh.
Constance in John.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You have like 30 years before you can play.
Gertrude in Hamlet. Man, there's more. I'd love to play some of the mistresses, right? Mistress Ford, Mistress Page, right? And
wait a minute. When you say you want to play mistresses, you mean the character titles, right? Not like, I mean, come on. Wow, that was scary.
I want to play characters that have names that start with the word mistress, like Mistress Page, Mistress Quickly. Hell, I'll even play Mistress Overdone. Very fun character.
That's like the most Dickens, by the way. I think, listen to that. Like, Dickens studied Shakespeare. He saw that and he went, okay, I'm going to name all my characters like that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what I'm learning from this is fun to think about too, is that I have yet to still dive into the tragedies and the histories, or where the older females, I'll call them, tend to come out stronger, I think. So I named a lot of characters that are in the history and plays, the tragedies. I feel like I'm checking off all my comedy boxes because I did Beatrice, I've done Rosalind. I will be doing Kate this coming summer. And the other lesser known comedies I'm not as excited about. I don't need to have, played those parts.
Do you have a Viola in you still?
No, Olivia. I would really like to play Olivia. I would play Viola as well, but I think I'm a little long in the tooth to play Viola these days.
I respect your candidness, your candor.
But I still believe there's Olivia in me. We could make that happen in the next couple of years because my clock is ticking on that one as well. I would love to play Portia in Merchant of Venice, but my clock's ticking on that one as well.
Well, you're going to be playing Portia in Merchant of Venice at our event.
Ooh, on the Guthrie
April,
stage. Even if
Guthrie
just
stage,
for a scene, I'll take it.
You've got it. And also, Annie's going to be serving as the MC for the event.
Oh, my first mistress role, right? As you called me, the mistress of ceremony.
Wow. Okay. There you go.
I'd rather be called the master of ceremony.
Wow. Okay. It's getting really raw in here, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, Annie will be serving as the MC for the event and also performing on the stage as Portia in our scene from The Merchant of Venice, which will be introduced with opening statements and then followed up by closing arguments. That's part of the format of our event coming up in Minneapolis in April. If you haven't looked into that yet, you need to go to monumentalshakespeare.com. Monumentalshakespeare.com is the website with all the details and the links to purchase your tickets and get your hotel reservation secured. Airfare is on you. Do it now. It's going to go up. It's about to get expensive. But right now, if you've looked, gas prices are down, fuel prices are down, airfare is down. That won't last as the holidays come. So book your flights as soon as you can and join us in Minneapolis in April. Annie, thank you so much for being willing to read through to the end of that book. she was about to put it down, folks. And I said, no, read it all the way through and let's do an episode.
It was painful. No.
I will always say, if Tina Packer would like to become a guest on Don't Quill the Messenger, she is more than welcome to come and defend her book.
Absolutely.
And I will treat her the same as I treat every other guest, with perfect politeness. That's my thing. So come on. If you want to come on the show, come on. Anyway, one thing that needs to be done today before we wrap things up is it is time for the Quiller of the Month. Annie, do the honors and introduce our wonderful producer.
And now, in my best corny announcer voice, passing it over to you, producer Jake, for this month's Quiller of the Month.
It's going to hate. I'm going to get emails about that.
I know.
Take it away, Jake.
Find it off-putting and corny. Oh, I'm sorry. I was distracted. I was just writing you an email there, Stephen. Anyways, it is I, producer Jake, here with the privilege and honor of naming November's official Quiller of the Month. If you don't know what this is, well, then you got to head on over to patreon.com/don'tquillthemessenger and find out. Each and every month, all eligible quillers get put into our Wheel O' Names here, and a winner is picked randomly who gets an item of their choosing from the shop. There's some fantastic new designs in the shop, by the way. You also get the clout of course, being the Quiller of the Month. And honestly, who doesn't want to go and brag about that? So without further ado, it is my honor to spin the wheel, and the Quiller of the Month for the month of November is James Gutierrez. James Gutierrez. I hope I am saying that correctly. I feel like I butcher everybody's names on this program, and nobody ever tells me otherwise. And so I'm just going to keep on doing it. James, congrats on your victory. Keep an eye out on your email so that you can learn how to claim your winnings. And thanks to each and every one of you who continues to support this program through Patreon. We could not do it without you, very literally. Could not do it without you, and we hope you enjoy our little contest every month. Thanks again, guys, and back to you, Stephen and Annie.
Thank you, Jake, and as always, congratulations to our winner. Once again, Jake, I'm so sorry. I apologize for Annie. She obviously got a little out of control practicing for her MC duties that she'll be fulfilling in April, and I promise she won't do it that way on stage in April. I promise. Just a few reminder, fellow Quillers, Jake has placed some new items in the Quiller swag shop. Be sure to check those out. The new cell phone cases are particularly fun, and I did just order my own items with the new Vainglorious print. If you haven't seen that, you need to. It's super cool. There's the colorized version, and then there's like the plain print version that you can get on various different color shirts and other items. So go to the swag shop and check out the new stuff. It's really cool. I know Jake works really hard. I know he's also working on a serial Quiller design for our diehard patrons, and I can't wait to see how that's going to turn out. I'm looking forward to a serial Quiller shirt. Thanks to you, serial Quillers and above, we are so close to one of our monthly goals, our fundraising goals, in order to be expanding our programming to you as we promised when we first launched the Patreon account almost 2 years ago now. And I want you to know that you need to keep an eye out and an ear out for our first live episode coming your way in January. Yes, a live Don't Quill the Messenger, where you can be a part of the episode as it is happening. Just another facet of Quiller programming we will be bringing you on top of our growing library of bonus features as well that you can also find through our Patreon page. Don't forget, you can tap into all things Quiller in nature by visiting that page, where you'll find also some new photos that I've posted and some other interesting things there. And don't forget to join our email subscriber list as well to stay informed through our monthly newsletter. Access to all of these links can be found on the homepage of the website, don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com. And keep sending me your emails. I appreciate hearing from all of you. I know it does take me some time to get back to you all, but I do respond. And I am creating a little collection of shout outs that I need to give at the top of the next episode for some of you who have reached out to me and given me some suggestions, some ideas, and just some interesting facts and things that you've thrown my way. I really appreciate receiving those. And remember, you can reach me, contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com, contact@don'tquillthepodcast.com. Thank you so much, Quiller Nation. I appreciate you. And thank you for joining us every fortnight on this mysterious journey we are taking together. Until next time, keep asking questions.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating and review in your podcast player. For even more, visit our website, don'tquillthepodcast.com. There you can find official merchandise in our shop, as well as a link to our Patreon. This show is made possible by people like you. We hope you'll consider showing your support by becoming a monthly patron, where you'll receive bonus material and tons of exclusive perks. You can also join in the conversation on our Discord and by following us at Don't Quill the Pod on all social media. All of this can be found at don'tquillthepodcast.com, don'tquillthepodcast.com.
Dragon Wagon.